It started like any routine live political broadcast, one of those town hall specials where senators from opposing parties face off on national issues in front of a live audience. And this time the topic was immigration, fentanyl, and the future of American sovereignty, with Senator Alex Padilla, the polished Democrat from California, stepping into the arena with what seemed like confidence and rhetorical preparation, prepared to confront Republican Senator JD Vance, the rising star from Ohio, who had built a reputation for mixing working-class realism with unapologetically blunt honesty. And for the first 20 minutes, the conversation danced along predictable lines, Padilla citing compassion, diversity, and inclusion as the cornerstones of immigration reform, and Vance responding with a sober emphasis on border security, drug enforcement, and accountability. But things shifted dramatically when Padilla, in a carefully timed jab, directly challenged Vance's integrity. Raising a hand slightly and saying with the air of someone delivering a final blow, "Senator Vance, you talk about fentanyl and chaos, but do you honestly believe your border rhetoric makes America safer? Are you just fear-mongering for votes?" And the audience, sensing the confrontation peak, leaned forward in collective anticipation, expecting Vance to either retreat into generalities or lash out defensively. But instead, he sat up straight, placed both hands flat on the table, and, with a tone so calm it almost chilled the air, responded with words that froze the room and rewrote the entire trajectory of the debate. "Senator Padilla, if standing between cartels and our children is fear-mongering, then I'll wear the label proudly, because your policies are letting poison pour across our border while you hold press conferences about empathy." And as the words landed, the audience collectively inhaled like they'd witnessed something unscripted, something real, and even Padilla seemed momentarily at a loss, his eyes narrowing not out of anger, but recalculation, because he had misjudged the moment, believing that JD Vance, the so-called populist senator, could be cornered with political labels, but instead found himself on the receiving end of a brutal moral contrast, one that cast Padilla as an idealist, disconnected from the practical horrors many Americans were facing, especially those in Rust Belt states where overdoses weren't numbers, they were funerals. And as the moderator struggled to regain control, JD Vance continued not with volume or bravado, but with surgical focus slaying out the statistics. The year-over-year rise in fentanyl deaths, the capture of cartel members within U.S. borders, and the leaked Border Patrol memos showing areas of total operational failure. Each point punctuated not for theatrics, but to reinforce the gravity of what he was saying. And what made it land harder was that he didn't frame the issue as Republican versus Democrat, but as truth versus consequences, painting a picture of what happens when slogans about compassion replace systems of enforcement. And though Padilla attempted to regroup by invoking the immigrant success story of his own family, his parents from Mexico, his rise from working class roots to the U.S. Senate, Vance didn't attack that. Instead, he nodded respectfully and responded, "That's a story to be proud of, Senator, but your parents came legally. And now your policies reward those who break the law and empower the ones who smuggle death to the innocent," which earned gasps from the crowd not because it was cruel, but because it cut through the noise with uncomfortable clarity, and in that moment it became evident to everyone watching, whether in the room or across the millions of screens live streaming the event, that the power dynamic had shifted. That this wasn't just a policy debate anymore. It was a reckoning. And while Padilla went on to cite studies, commissions, and committee hearings, none of it could erase the visceral effect of Vance's argument, which had hit not just the brain, but the gut. And this wasn't lost on viewers or pundits, because within minutes of airing, the clip of Vance's poison and empathy sentence began going viral, posted by influencers, news aggregators, and political commentators who declared it the line of the night, the debate tender, the shift. And what made it more potent was that it wasn't shouted or dressed in applause lines. It was spoken plainly, like someone finally saying out loud what many had felt, but few dared articulate on national television. And while Padilla's defenders rushed to say he had spoken for the marginalized, others pointed out that defending the vulnerable requires protecting them firsthand, that in that arena Vance had dominated, And over the following days, the fallout continued. Cable news invited both senators for interviews, though only Vance's segments consistently trended online. Radio hosts called it the moment a new conservative era was born. And political action committees clipped the debate into ads, urging voters to support candidates who speak like Vance, not like Washington. While Padilla's camp issued a carefully worded statement reiterating his commitment to both compassion and enforcement. But by then, the narrative had already calcified in the public mind that JD Vance had not only answered Padilla's challenge, he had redefined the rules of engagement, offering a blueprint for how conviction, when tethered to evidence and unshaken by labels, could silence even the most well-rehearsed political challenger. And this was not merely about immigration or border security anymore. It was about authenticity in a political culture suffocating under platitudes. And so while Padilla faded from headlines, JD Vance continued his momentum, appearing on state tours, speaking with border sheriffs, and reinforcing his message, not with further attack, but with lived stories and legislative proposals. Because for him, this wasn't a win to spike the ball over. It was a mandate to speak for families who had lost children, for agents who risked their lives, for a country desperate for leaders who didn't flinch when challenged, but stood taller, clearer, and calmer. And that was the moment the public didn't just hear JD Vance, they started listening. Asterisk. The aftermath of the now infamous exchange between Alex Padilla and JD Vance unfolded not like a passing headline, but like a political aftershock, reverberating far beyond the confines of the studio, shaking campaign war rooms, shifting donor calculations, and setting the tone for a nationwide debate that had previously languished in euphemisms and abstractions. And as the clip of Vance's calmly devastating reply continued to dominate every major social platform, retweeted by senators, clipped into reels by influencers, and dissected by political analysts from both ends of the ideological spectrum, it became clear that this moment wasn't just a flash of television, drama, but the crystallization of something far more significant. A turning point in how the American public understood both the border crisis and the politicians talking about it. And while Vance remained mostly quiet in the 48 hours following the debate, his silence only amplified the gravity of what he had said. He didn't need to clarify, correct, or walk anything back, because the message had landed with such force and clarity that even his critics were left analyzing the impact rather than questioning the content. And within the halls of the Capitol, the dynamics began to shift. Members of Vance's own party privately praised his performance asterisk,